Let's go!
Chat, here we go. This is my Date a Live Ren Dystopia game review. On the last Date a Live game, we recently talked about the Ren Dystopia was getting crazy. I could not believe the girls in that game. And then I also followed up with my, the sequel game, Ren Dystopia 2, Electric Spacebound, my favorite game. I love it. Yeah, no, that's where I'm at. This is a spoiler. This is a spoiler. I am under the not a multiverse theory. That's where my brain eventually landed. It gives the impression that it is, but I think it isn't. Talking with Naoki Yamaguchi, director, Yoshinori Kitatse, lead producer, and Teruki Endo, combat designer. Taking on one of the most beloved series in the Final Fantasy franchise was never going to be an easy task. 7 was originally released in 1997. Fluff, 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 fluff. 30 years later, how does a team recreate that for a brand new generation and nostalgic fans? In the hour-long interview with Hamaguchi, Kitase, and Endo about the changes in character leveling, plans to expand player freedom. Ooh, bro, how? I can... Okay. The secrets of Stamp the Shinra Dog and that controversial ending. Ooh. Straight acknowledgement that shit is controversial, huh? Again, our conclusion at the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, just so you guys know, that there is no conclusion. There's several paths you can take of thought of like this ending or like that ending or this happened or that happened. But every time you think about it and you follow it, it leads to a dead end. And it's like, okay, so that's not that. But then you think of it this way, the other way, well, then it stops there. This circumvents that. And the same thing kind of happened to all the theorists, right? All the people that were big theory people. We kind of agreed that like, this feels intentional. To a degree, there's some fun allowed, but at some point it's like they knew that people are going to be like arguing up the wazoo about this and arguing their theory, but there is actually no solid answer. In the previous game, we had some pretty clear evidence that this was a sequel. And again, a reminder, in FF7 Remake Part 1, that was not known yet, you know? It was not confirmed that this game was like a sequel, Sephiroth from the future, like all this kind of shit. We did not know that. That got confirmed during the Rebirth playthrough. That was sort of like confirmation that our wild-ass theory crafting, they were putting out hints and we were kind of right. The community was right. But because of that, the devs knew that shit and made sure that there was no way you're coming to any one theory that is correct. Any one conclusion about the ending is technically not right. Which I kind of appreciate because they really covered their basis at the end of Rebirth. So anyway, that was the finality of our thought process, was that like, yeah, any theory is kind of bullshit at this point. This is going to contain spoilers about the ending of Rebirth. What balancing changes did you face when expanding the world and playable characters? One major difference is that the number of characters significantly increases. So balance adjustments were necessary. With Rebirth, a new system was added, synergy and synergy skills. This had to be done considering the existing attributes of the characters and then readjusting based to those to create those abilities and skills. What was the impetus for automating the weapon skill system as opposed to how it was used in Remake? Looking into Remake, the growth mechanics were fewer in terms of player choosing their passive skills for characters, but in Rebirth, this was increased to including the synergy mechanic, and as we touched on, as well as the affinity between the characters impacting their abilities and skills, and as a part of the overall growth mechanics. So all of these were added in new growth mechanics, the underlying mindset consolidating these systems when considering adding all of these individual systems to the title. I thought this would require the players to be more mindful and take time to carefully look into each one of them. And when thinking of that, I thought the best way could be to consolidate these into one skill tree, where all these new changes can be observed through this skill tree. The amount of shit you can do in this game is crazy. Like, I can't imagine them talking about it being expanded. We're gonna make it even bigger and crazier, and I'm like, I have a question for Kitase, but those reports of the remake game sales underperforming, are there plans to change the console exclusivity window? Wow, this is a good question. For the next installment of the remake trilogy. Regarding the strategy of the console release, there's sort of nothing we can comment on that, but overall, we are looking forward to more players enjoying and playing this title. I can only say console exclusivity has almost done nothing but negatively impact Final Fantasy in the PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5 generation. Almost had nothing but like a negative impact from FF7 Remake and forward. Remake would have been so much bigger if it just had the ability to be released on PC day one and on Xbox day one. It would have been so much bigger. In the May version of Inside Square, Endo-san stated he wanted to give the player even more freedom in the third game. Can you share some of the ideas? I'm unable to comment on granular details, but I believe that instead of the developers or the creators dictating how the players should play along as a pre-planned path, so to speak, it's better to allow more freedom in the user choice to be able to play in their own way they wish to. To me, the only reason that's possible is because the next game is the end. With part 1 and part 2, there's always the problem of like, okay, so we have to save this for the next game, right? We cannot use this yet. That's going to be a next game thing, or that thing is going to be a game after the next game. So no, don't utilize that stuff. Well, now it's the end. So it's just whatever was on the table, you have to put it on the table now. There's no game after this. You're just gonna have to go nuts gameplay-wise or traversal-wise, or you know, whatever crazy shit that they want to do, snowboarding for traversal, like all that kind of shit, you're gonna have to just put it on the table and let it go. Naturally, there are challenges to realizing that, and when you go into making that a reality, my thoughts are also that for the Final Fantasy series to continue and reinvent itself is to revitalize itself and stay fresh to players. This type of constant evolution is necessary in terms of the battle elements as well. So those are underlying thoughts I had while making that comment. This bitch is really turning into like the Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I used this example when I was playing. FF7 Rebirth is like the Marvel 2 of action RPGs with the full team involvement and all that shit. It feels like this is the Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Like, this is fucking crazy how much stuff you can do. In the Ultimania, it's mentioned that the new trilogy was an opportunity to expand on the characters' backstories and add new scenes and details. What new scenes in 7 Remake and Rebirth were you the most excited to incorporate into the game? Hamaguchi says, in terms of something that was sort of new in Rebirth compared to the original, we have that gold saucer date event that everyone's familiar with, but this time we added a variety of dates you can go on in terms of who you can go on a date with. We believe that we were able to answer the players' wants in terms of increasing the variety of this special event. The characters in 7 are beloved by its fans, so that in a way was increasing the number of characters you can go on a date with, as well as the actual contents of the date was something that I thought was very positively received. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was a really good call. Even in the Otakon panel, when we were engaged with the community, the Kate Sith date was brought up, and that's a newly added, of course, during Rebirth, and there were a lot of fans that were happy and excited about it. The bummer date with Vincent and Sid. Endo says, my favorite scene in Rebirth was the one with Dyne and Barrett. The moment was also exists in the original, but in Rebirth, this is portrayed as a more, much more detailed, down to a point where we really see the character's facial expressions. It's very dramatic, and a heartfelt moment that gives a new perspective on everything that happens in the scene. Even though we've done test plays like the run-throughs of the game so many times, this is the one scene I never skip. It's special to me. Which is funny because I think the Dyne moment embellishes a little too much, you know? It's weird that I think this is just a cultural thing. The drama of that scene really hits with like a Japanese audience. And I hear a lot of people on my end and outside of it is like, yeah, the Dyne scene was only okay. I kind of like the original more. I think I like the less dramatic one. Quality of the scene is great. The acting is wonderful. The voice acting's incredible. But I think it almost embellishes a little bit too much on the scene. Cutscene director mentioned that Cloud's big dance number in Remake was the most ambitious and challenging. Was Aerith's performance in the Golden Saucer similar? Is there another cinematic sequence in Rebirth that takes the crown for the greatest challenge? The hardest thing was the inauguration parade. I'll go into why. First, we had to look at for a person that understands parade formations. Someone with experience, hard to find. Then we had to find actors who could perform these sequences. So with both of these requirements, we had to look and have all of them before we started motion capture. It took a while to find these individuals. An interesting story I'd like to share in that scene. All the soldiers, including Cloud, have guns in their hands when they're doing the parade. To mimic this, we created real gun models for all the actors to hold in the sequence. And then when that happened, all the gun models we made were so heavy and it was impossible to move, you know, twirling around with all these motions, so it became a problem. In the end, even though they made those models, they used umbrellas. The gun models were heavier than actual guns. You know approximately how many people, motion capture actors they needed for that scene? We had about 30 to 40 soldiers in the parade within the game. We can't fit all those people in a mocap studio, so we had about 6 people. Yeah, that makes sense. You film in various areas doing the routine, then we put those together in CG. Fans have been crying to decode the secrets of the stamp variations, the Shinra dog. Square patched this shit, by the way, because one of them was an error. So yeah, they're paying attention. One of the stamps was the wrong universe stamp, where it's like the different worlds. There was one in Junon that was the wrong stamp, and they went back and they fixed it. So it's like, oh, okay, somebody didn't get the memo. Yeah, pretty much there was a story thing. So when the player goes through playing Remake and Rebirth, it does come to a point where one can have many conjectures about what this means. The reason we included the different stamps was a signal of the different layers and different timelines within this world. So that acts as a mark for the player to see and say, oh, what's that? These are shown in each timeline. We would see stamp like on a bag of sweets or on a doll in a gift shop. They put a little markers or Easter eggs, yes. And it's just used to identify this is different. Like the very first time we saw the difference It's used to tell the player this is different, you know? And I think that was a pretty smart like storytelling thing. It's a weird thing, but to promote the idea that these aren't the same world, they used a cartoon dog that is shown to you throughout the entire game, and then suddenly the cartoon dog is completely different where something very different is happening. I'm like, it's a pretty interesting storytelling beat. What is the wildest fan theory that you've seen about the trilogy so far? Naoki Yamaguchi says, after the panel yesterday, we were chatting with the voice actors over dinner, and this exact topic came up. We were talking about Chadley, which is the character that supports Cloud. We were talking about how some people think that he's actually evil and will turn out to be the last boss in the final battle. We were cracking up about that. Chadley would like step on Sephiroth's head like it's the end of Demon Souls or some shit, walk over his body. Cloud, I have some new intel. Kitase says, I don't know if this is something unexpected or anything, but I guess there's not really a specific thing or theory that I can comment on right now, but we do hear a lot of players with different conjectures saying, how much will this story change from the original? And I do want to comment that I don't think that's how it will be. We've always kept the original in mind. Yeah, again, this was another thing at the end of part 1 that people were like big freaking about, where it's just like, oh, bro, like the rest of the game is going to be complete bullshit, and they're going to cut this, they're going to cut that. This is just an excuse to give us like a cheaper game than the original. Everybody was saying that at the end of Remake Part 1, that effectively the Unknown Journey was like, oh, it's a completely different game now. I didn't get that feeling at all. I had to like remind people that like, well, the majority of part 1 was like extremely faithful with a bunch of added shit. So I don't know why they would just immediately betray people. It didn't make any sense to me that people would come to that conclusion. We've always kept the original in mind, and I don't think it's going to be a storyline that will betray the fans of the original, but also at the same time, it's 27 years. There are things that we feel we can only do now in the remake project that can bring new happiness, new sorts of feelings and satisfaction to players playing this over 27 years. What this will entail is something we hope players will experience soon. Are there any plans to introduce a physical version of Queen's Blood? Oh, this has been asked a lot. It's in high demand. New hires come into Square Enix. People get people excited. They created their own DIY version of Queen's Blood. There's only one in the world. Unfortunately, we cannot share the information, and not just the cards, but they made a stage. They shared a picture of the backdrop they made using 3D modeling. What mini games were the most challenging to implement? And were there any favorite games among the staff? Will there be new mini games to look forward to in the next installment? Damn, which mini game was one of my favorites? Chocobo flying would have been fun if it wasn't so goddamn hard. I really love the dolphin minigame. Queen's Blood obviously is cheating. Queen's Blood is cheating. I very much enjoyed the dolphin minigame. Oh, I liked G-Bike a lot. I wish there was more. It was too easy, dude. G-Bike was just over, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's it? That's the hardest one? Kate Sith aiming, you can kiss my ass, Blitz. As one of the most challenging to implement, I'd say Queen's Blood, yeah, of course, because Queen's Blood was the most well-realized. Various minigames in Rebirth, there are some where a player might play once or a few times, and there are ones like Queen's Blood where they just play over and over again. Seeing that Queen's Blood was the type of minigame I knew that we had to put time and effort into, that would be a satisfying way to play. It was challenging to work on this. I think hearing positive feedback from the players, as you said, was successful in making this. Yeah. I don't play many TCGs. That shit grabbed the hell out of me, dude. What'd you think of Gears and Gambit? I'd rather eat my fucking hand than play it again. And for the ones of the staff's favorite besides Queen Bloods, I think the Chocobo race was a big favorite, since you don't really need a prior understanding. You can just play it. In terms of Rebirth, we aim to provide the minigame experience where there would be a variety of which players can find their favorite. I think we succeeded in doing so for Rebirth, but we don't look to do exactly the same going into the next title, since we want to continue offering the very fresh experience. A reminder of that, there's only going to be so much time for minigame stuff in the next game. In terms of how the game's pacing is going to be, there is only so much space in the next game of fitting in minigame stuff every once in a while. And it's like the first to maybe second act. And after that, no, you're on a roller coaster, dude. I almost guarantee you, I'll put gift sub bets down on it right now, there's going to be airship combat. There's going to be like, you use the high wind, or you use some sort of like piloted ship. You get in and you have to like fight Shinra airships and shit in the air. I almost guarantee that shit is happening. They even teased it as much. As opposed to just increasing the number of minigames available, our focus on providing minigames like Queen's Blood or Chocobo Racing, where a player would want to come back and play over and over again throughout the course of the game. Which boss battle mechanic was the most satisfying to pull off, and which was the most challenging? I love all the bosses, so it's hard to choose. If I were to pick one, it would be the Galleon Beast. Vincent, I think it was a fun, unique boss fight that required the players to almost switch or flow between the action-based and the strategy-based battle. You'd go in between these approaches and have to maneuver between them. I think it was very satisfying, and we were happy to implement that battle. By the way, brand new. You don't fight Vincent. in FF7. Midgar Stormer Battle also took time to work on because this is a boss that presents in the original. In the minds of the players, it has quite a presence, but it also comes up very early stages of the game. So it was conscious of striking this balance between it not being too hard so that the player finds it extremely challenging to defeat the boss, but also at the same time making it hard enough. Midgar Stormer's hard. You know why he's hard? Because we tried him at a preview event. And if you don't get like the ice materia by doing a couple side quests and shit, you're gonna get fucked up. Like you're actually gonna get sort of gated by this dude. If you explore the area and kind of do some stuff in the first chapter or the second chapter, that fight gets super easy. Like I've kind of like exhausted a lot of the things I can do here. The fight's like a cakewalk. But man, if you just gun it over there and fight only a few things, he kind of fucks you up, dude. Rebirth remakes one of the most famous scenes in video game history. For new audiences, some reactions post-game included confusion on how to interpret the new development. What reaction was the staff hoping to garner from players? And what message did you want? Or did you even have a comment for players who feel this new version events is confusing or unsatisfying? I'm assuming they are completely prepared for it, and that was almost intentional. That the whole point of it was to be bewildering and confusing, to save for the next game. So when we play tested this game and went through countless numbers of times, I thought that players who were going to play Rebirth were going to have various perspectives throughout the ending and thoughts about the ending. We had already announced the beginning of this remake series would be a trilogy, so when we considered doing 3 games, of course, there will be some time in between releasing each one. I also discussed how we want the community to interact with this while they're waiting for that next installment. So Kitase-san and I were also discussing this, and we thought it's very enjoyable for the community to have something very worthy of intense discussion, like what's really going on here. That was something we wanted and expected going into creating this scene. No shit. In terms of the experience we anticipated and also desired, I think we are satisfied in that there are both negative and positive reactions to the scene. Imagine if you played through this game and it played 1-to-1 and it just played out the same way and you jumped in a plane and went to the next game or some shit. I wonder if it would have that much of an impact. I wonder if it would be like, oh, if that would really hit in the ways that you might expect it to. It's just it's not just a remaster. It'd still be a completely different game. I'm saying specifically not all the events of the game, specifically the ending, specifically the lost capital, you know, when Aerith dies. It would be better for newcomers. It might, as I have engaged with people that have played Rebirth and watched a lot of people that have seen that ending, guess which one that ending resonates the most with? Newcomers. People that only played Remake Part 1. The people that usually get sort of diluted and confused and don't really like that ending are actually the OG fans. I don't get it. And it's like, it seems like it would be completely the opposite. But most people were like, you know, they just sort of accepted the ending for as it is. But they're unaware. You have to put yourself in the mindscape that you don't know what's gonna happen next. So if you're completely unaware of how it was in the original, much less where it could possibly go in the next one, the ending could be kind of straightforward, where you're just like, okay, wow, that's so sad, you know? And that's kind of what it is. I see people crying at the ending and shit, and like, that was not my reaction, bro. My head was fucking spinning at the end. I'm like, also to add to this and to offer an alternate perspective, when discussing the scenario with Nomura Nojima, we were also talking about how in the original, it's from Cloud's perspective. His feelings of oh god, they're really going here. His feelings of loss, dude. Are they really going to explain the credits of losing someone that you love and having this hole in your heart? When considering how to depict that in the remake series, we also thought about how not only expressing this loss of someone who means so much to you, but also this sense of a person experiencing loss, being unable to force yourself to forget that person, and almost like an inability to accept it, struggling with the possibility of losing someone. So that was something we wanted to show in Rebirth. Fuck, dude. They just laid it out. People legit thought the shit in the credits of the omission of all of the events in the credits was intentional. Well, I'm sorry, was unintentional. That's like, that's just there for no reason. It's like, dude, no, that's there for a reason. Like everything they've done in this story from part 1 is there for a reason. Everything is from Cloud's perspective, which is extremely unreliable. So yeah, that's just like confirmation of it, you know? So effectively having spooky Aerith hanging out with Cloud, telling him shit, which I think is a manipulation of Sephiroth and Jenova. That's my extremely controversial opinion, that spooky Aerith at the end of Remake Rebirth is going to continue into the next game. She's not just going to stay there. I think she's going to be big chilling in Cloud's mind space, telling him shit that he's going to start listening to. Regarding the original, Its first disc ends with a huge loss, and I recall some people not even wanting to continue playing and changing over disc 2 because they didn't want to continue playing anymore because of that. It's such a huge feeling of loss and despair, but I do think there's a synchronization of feelings between players and Cloud, struggling with how do I deal with this feeling, the feeling of loss and how a person struggled to take that on was happening. We imagine the players of Rebirth would also have that synchronous feeling. And here's what I think is intentional. I 100% felt that shit at the end of this playthrough, where it wasn't as much the loss of a character and you don't want to accept their loss. FF7 fans lost their moment. And I think it's almost like meta shit. And this game's also very meta. The part 1 was also very meta in many ways. I think the big meta shit here is that we got robbed of our moment from the old game. Like, you took that from us. They intentionally, it cuts to black, dude, and then just picks up after it happened. It's like, what are we doing here? You have no closure. It's like somebody just got taken from you and you didn't even get to say goodbye. It's like it's by design. They specifically made you feel that way. Upon like the review of the ending, that was a conclusion that we kind of came to. It's like, oh no, they thought of this. Oh God, they're saving it. It wasn't that it was omitted, it's that it's being preserved. They're preserving it for the next game to be used at a moment that is potentially more critical. To be used in a moment where it's like, oh, now you as the player and you as Cloud have to accept this shit, bro. Like, and that's, to me, that's Cloud's awakening. That's it. The part where him and Tifa together in Cloud's fucking freaky mind space, they have to accept that she's gone. And that's the only way we can move forward. My favorite moment in OG FF7 is when Cloud comes to. You know, V has come to. It's that moment. I think the more you can enhance that moment of like, he's finally back. He's been gone for this long. I think if their goal is to enhance that moment, then that part 3 is going to be crazy, man. I can't wait. And it's just going to be more context of the situation. Cloud's going to get convinced by Sephiroth that you killed Aerith. You know? And then Tifa's going to be like, wait, no, that did not happen. Or maybe it did. Oh God, we don't know. Oh shit, we don't know as the player. Yeah, nobody else saw what happened. This was a great interview, dude. Holy crap. Yeah, big shout out to James, dude. This answered a lot of great questions and had the developers going into several aspects of like the ending and just giving me more personal, I'd say, vindication of where they're going with this shit. Yeah, I think we were on the money. You know, when we had the podcast with Blitz and everybody else and Schrodinger's and Knight, I think we're kind of on the money with this shit of like where they're going with this, and we have ideas of where they could possibly go, but us having no conclusive answers is sound. That was intended.